Welcome, everyone. I am so pleased to welcome you here to the presentation of the Harper Award this year. I am going to introduce the chairperson, I should say, my apologies, of the Harper Wornom Committee of the REA, Mr. Montague Williams. Montague is professor of church, culture, and society at Point Loma Nazarene University, and he's author of the book Church in Color: Youth Ministry, Race, and the Theology of Martin Luther King Jr. He's an ordained minister, and he has a PhD in theological studies from Boston University. Please welcome Montague.
Thank you, Jennifer. As Jennifer noted, my name is Montague, and I serve as the chair of the Harper Wornom Committee. The William Rainey Harper Award is named after the first president of the University of Chicago and founder of the Religious Education Association. As noted on the REA website, this award is given to outstanding leaders whose work in other fields has had profound impact upon religious education. Some previous recipients include Margaret Mead, Elie Wiesel, Paulo and Elza Freire, Martin Marty, and Parker Palmer. It is an immense honor to present this award today to the Reverend Dr. Emilie Townes. When we put out the request for nominations, we asked the REA to consider authors beyond religious education who you love to include in your syllabi, as well as educators and justice leaders whose lives and writings have become sources of wisdom for religious education. Naming a person who embodies all of that is rare. And I should note that the REA does not grant this award very often. However, the REA Board of Directors voted unanimously to offer this award to Dr. Townes. We are excited she has accepted. Along with a lifetime membership to the REA, as part of this award, the REA is offering an official signed print from Carmel Beaujolin Caldwell's Nina's Liturgy and Seven Last Words series. And I believe Jennifer Moe has there we go. That is a picture of what Dr. Townes has selected, which is the piece called New World Coming Resurrection. Emilie Townes was the keynote speaker for REA's 2015 annual meeting, and she has remained a profound influence and inspiration for the field. Through her work on what she calls fantastic hegemonic imagination, we find tools for discerning and understanding and practice of religious education that can honestly name the complex operations of systemic wrongs and harms that a justice-oriented religious education must resist and counter. Her work points to joy, hope, and resilience. Emilie Townes is the Martin Luther King Jr. Professor of Religion and Black Studies. Some of you may have read her bio in preparation for this gathering, but I thought I would share some things from her bio for you, just in case you have not read it yet, or in case you're new to REA. I know there are some students out there as well. She is the Dean Emerita and former University Distinguished Professor of Womanist Ethics and Society at Vanderbilt University Divinity School and the College of Arts and Science, becoming the first African-American to serve as Dean of the Divinity School in 2013. She is the former Andrew W. Mellon Professor of African-American Religion and Theology at Yale University Divinity School. And in the fall of 2005, she was the first African-American woman elected to the presidential line of the American Academy of Religion and served as president in 2008. She was the first African-American and first woman to serve as Associate Dean for Academic Affairs in the Yale Divinity School. Now, I should add, she is the former Carolyn Williams Beard Professor of Christian Ethics at Union Theological Seminary and Professor of Social Ethics at St. Paul School of Theology. She is the author and editor of many books, including her groundbreaking book, Womanist Ethics in the Cultural Production of Evil, and her most recent book, Walking Through the Valley, Essays, Womanist Explorations in the Spirit of Katie Geneva Cannon. Now, in that bio that I read, you heard a lot of firsts in there. Dr. Townes' writing and leadership has not been about being the first, but about changing the framework and fabric of theological studies so that she isn't the last. We are so thankful for her work. We are so thankful for her presence. And as a Boston University School of Theology alum, I am personally thankful to present this award to you. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Emilie Townes, for accepting.
Thank you, Montague. And thank you, Jennifer, and also all of REA and whoever was responsible for this. When I first received the initial email, I was like, really? And it was a moment of irony for me. Some of you may know if you've read all of my bio, that I have 3 degrees from the University of Chicago. So in some ways, if you cut me, I'd bleed out William Rainey Harper because he's still very much alive um, at that school, and you didn't get through there without hearing about him and his impact. And then when I kept going and went to the divinity school, he followed me there because he's the one who brought the Baptist Theological Union Seminary from Morgan Park to the university to make the first professional school of the University of Chicago. And he's a Baptist, I'm a Baptist. I mean, it just goes on and on. It's almost ridiculous the ways in which his legacy and my life are intertwined. So it was a great honor to receive an award named in his honor because of the ways in which I think his vision of education, which not everybody agreed with, but he created something special there at Chicago, and I think he created something special with the REA as well. It's one of my more fond memories of having to do a talk for a group of folks because you all actually listened uh, when I did the talk in 2015, and I knew you listened because the questions were hard enough that I had to really think about the answers when we got to Q&A because you were already trying to figure out how does this apply? How can I change? How can I take this into my classroom or my school? And there's nothing better for me as a speaker to be engaged with folks who are engaging my ideas because I'm trying to put them out there so that we can have a conversation, which is one of the things I say to folks. If we could figure out more ways to have conversations with each other, we might not be in some of the places we're in now. If we learn how to both listen and speak with with a generous spirit and an open heart, and that's not always easy to pull off these days, but I'm still a believer in that. And I think the last thing I want to say, um, unless we're going to open this up for questions or whatnot, I'm not sure, Jennifer, if that's on, Montague, if that's on the agenda since we have an hour to do this. But I'm fine with that if it is to talk just a little bit about what I tried to do as a theological administrator, both as an academic dean and then later as a dean, and in both cases in embedded schools and a university. So I know the world is a little bit different there from freestanding places. But I think this holds no matter what. Um, I come from a two-parent college professor household, which is not true for a lot of folks in my generation, particularly a lot of Black folk in my generation. But they both um, brought the love of learning into our family home. And when I was a little kid and would finish grade school for the day, I could walk about 4 blocks up the street and get to the biology building where my mother was a professor, and sit and outside her classroom and listen to her teach. And she did not know I was there oh, until I was being installed in the Carolyn Williams Beard Professorship at Union, and I talked about that. And later she's like, "You were sitting outside the classroom?" I said, "Yeah, didn't you notice? I was always there." She said, "Oh, I thought you just walked up." When I came out, I said, "No, I was sitting there listening to you." And one of the things that I took from that was how much she clearly loved teaching. She was the best lecturer I have ever heard in my life. And the way she would communicate scientific facts to, students who were taking the class because they had to, rather than because they wanted to. But she could make it interesting. And apparently, I was never in the classroom, but my mother was left-handed. And so if she really got going, I've learned in later years, she would be writing something on with her left hand and erasing with her right hand as she went. And students would sit there transfixed, trying to figure out how in the world did she pull that off? And mom was not aware that that's what she was doing. But enough people talked about it, I knew it had to be true. So I came from an academic family. And of course, being a teenager and then a young adult, I didn't want to do the family business. So clearly, I failed at that miserably because here we are today. Um, and as I began um, as the academic dean um, at Yale, I decided that my watchword needed to be, what can I do and how can I create structures and systems that help people do their best work? And that the people I was thinking of was not only the faculty, but the students and the staff as well. That's my job. And if I stick to that one thing, hopefully good things will come out of it. And I took that mantra into my work as the dean at Vanderbilt, because it seemed to me that um, there were enough talented people on the faculties I served on that I needed to get out of the way and let them do their thing, but to provide a structure for them so that they wouldn't go too far, and begin to do things that were not as productive, but may have been interesting. So it was a balance. It's been a balance over the years. So it's with that spirit. I really wanted to say thank you. Uh, it's good. I'm always happiest when I'm among educators, except when we're fighting. And this doesn't look like a fighting group today, so we're in good shape. And so I turn it back to you now, Montague and Jennifer.
I will actually leave it to Jennifer to discern how best to use the remaining time. This is one of those strange things when you transition to virtual, you create these blocks, and Q&A is a potential gift, I would add, if we want to go for that.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say when you mentioned having hard questions when you spoke with us last in 2015. I was going to add that one of the gifts of receiving an award is that you don't have to do a Q&A if you don't want to. However, I welcome a Q&A if you are willing, and if we have some questions that folks would like to add. Are you up for it?
Sure. I mean, that's my favorite. I give talks so that we can get to the Q&A.
Awesome.
I just, I know what my voice sounds like, but I don't know what folks' ideas are. And that's where I think the magic comes in public speaking.
Well, thank you so much. I will open up the floor. You can either put a question in the chat, and I am happy to call on you from there or ask it myself. Or if someone would like to, you can raise your hand like this if your camera's on, or you can use the raise your hand feature down below. We've got one. Dr. China, Mariam Cook from Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
I love you, Dr. Townes. I love you. Okay. All right. You already know
Thanks,
that.
Jenna.
Okay. You're welcome. So my question is, for me, representation absolutely matters. And here at Lancaster Theological Seminary, you might as well say that you are like the echelons of theological perspective, of womanist frameworks, and and it's kind of bold. Some of the things that you say, I mean, you have all of this under your belt, so you can speak how you speak. But I'm curious, from the stuff where you center Black women's voices, you talk about systemic and cultural things and institutions. You speak truth to power, and you talk about communal and pastoral care. What would you say, especially because you have been a lot of times the first African American woman in so many situations? How were you able? And I know I would suspect because you have had the parents that you've had, but how have you been able to speak truth to power and kind of the juxtaposition of maybe some of the oppression that may happen in academic circles, especially being a woman of color?
Um, I blame a lot of what I do on my mother, for good or for ill. And since she's gone now, almost 25 years, um, if she appears, it's in my dreams and it's usually okay. But before I started my first full-time teaching position at St. Paul School of Theology, um, in one of our Sunday morning check-in calls, I asked her, what word of advice do you have for me as I've got to move from Evanston all the way to Kansas City. I know this is the place I should be going. I don't have any questions about this, but what's your best word of advice for me? Like, yeah, Mom, tell me. And all she said was, always tell the truth. Because if you do, they won't believe that that's actually what you mean. And they will spend time trying to figure out what you really are up to and what you really think, and you can go ahead and get your work done. And I sat there for a little bit and I said, okay, all right, that seems easy enough to do. And then I had to do it for the first time several months later. And she was right. I sat there watching this whole scenario unfold when I had actually said what I meant. And folks couldn't believe that's what I meant. So they kept trying to figure out what I really meant. And I could continue to get my work done. And I think, and the other thing about always telling the truth is you don't have to remember the lies you tell because, eventually they're going to catch up with you. So with that, I also learned by telling the truth, yes, you can do it with candor, but I've also got to do it with grace and care. Because I actually like people and I don't want to hurt them. I want us to be able to engage together, but I also believe that it's better if we're not trying to do shifty moves around each other. So that for me, I think has been key. The other thing is I have been exceedingly blessed with having a circle of folks around me who are very good accountability partners. The first one, although she's now gone, was Katie Geneva Cannon. Katie embarrassed me into going back to school to get my PhD. And didn't apologize for doing so ever. But folks like that who will tell me the truth and understand that it's a reciprocal, that's I'm expected to tell the truth to them. And so I get ongoing practice at being someone or being engaged with folks in ways that you just don't lie to folk. It's not healthy. And that gets hard sometimes because we all know institutions sometimes are built around obfuscation and innuendo. And so being the person at the gate with the lepers and saying, why sit we here? Maybe there's another place we need to go. Maybe there's another way to build this institution. I mean, all those things are factors, I think, that have helped me over the years. And I feel like I'm still learning too. I'll be 70 in less than a month, and it feels like I'm just starting. It's amazing. And I'm kind of glad about it because my goal is to make it to 90. And we'll see.
Thank you so much. I see a question from Vaughn in the chat. Oh, well, a couple of comments. Eileen Daly says, I like your mother. And Elizabeth Nolan says, Amen. So Vaughn, would you like to speak your question out?
I'll certainly be glad to. Earlier today, some of us in one of the earlier sessions had to come up with some things that we had observed that were consequential changes in the field of religious education, and we ended up with artificial intelligence. So I was just wondering, as you think back across your life's journey, what are some of the consequential changes you observed in this field?
Although it's not enough, the diversification of voices and cultures. I think that has been, for me, not, well, no, I'm not even going to try and rank it. It has caused um, not only intellectual change, but sometimes physical, but almost always spiritual change for us as educators. As we expand who's sitting at the table, who's coming into our classrooms, the worlds in which we engage when we do our own scholarship and teaching, how they expand us, and hopefully we give something back to it. So I think the diversification of who's doing the work and where are the voices in that. Um, you all have talked about AI. I think that's our easiest pointer to these days because it's so new and it's growing so quickly that it's a little frightening at times. Um, I'm a firm believer in just because we know how to do it doesn't mean we should, especially if we don't have a clue um, about consequences. And it's not that we don't, but I think it's important to think ahead to what's the next thing. And this is my ethicist hat being uh, tipped here. Um, we have to look 2 or 3 steps ahead, always, I think. I think the downsizing of mainline religions in the US in particular, and what that has done and put pressure on our various seminaries, and how many are closing or merging. And it's not, that pace is quickening. It's not slowing down. We haven't hit the place where, okay, it's only going to be up from here or it's going to be stable from here. There's so much more, I think, that we're going to see in the coming years as the schools available for folks to go and get an education are going to shrink. And with that, you see shrinking perspectives. I always say, even when I was on the board of the Association of Theological Schools, and we would say yes to a new associate member, because there's a staged process, and they had 5 faculty and 20 students. And some people would say, well, why are we doing this? I said, well, they have a viewpoint we need to hear, even if I disagree with it. We never know who God's going to speak through. It's not always going to be us. And maybe we have some things to learn. So that I think, because we don't know where it's going, that also I think makes many of us a little nervous or a little wary of what's going on. So those are some of the things.
Thank you. Elizabeth has put in the chat that she'd like to hear a little bit more about something. Elizabeth, would you like to ask in person?
Yeah. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you, Emilie. I'm hoping that you don't mind my calling you Emilie rather than
No.
Dr. Townes. Is that okay?
Well,
I think
it's a name my mother gave, well, my grandmother gave me.
right. I'm thrilled to hear your perspective, particularly about education, about teaching, your vision for helping the students, the faculty, the staff, for everyone else to be doing their best work. And that for me is the very essence of caring about teaching and a caring teacher. But in particular, I wanted to pick up on your idea about conversations. because at Union Theological Seminary, when I was there in the early 80s, that's one aspect for me. It wasn't just the lectures that one had. It was the opportunity to get together with the faculty for informal conversations, and especially visiting folks who were brought in by my prof, Will Kennedy, from the World Council of Churches, etc. And it's that sitting down and talking together. I currently have been chairing the religious education in public life and global community. And with Lauren Zinn, we've been talking about how important conversations, getting to know one another, sharing our stories. And I think that's one of the key essences of what your approach to education has been. And as we sit and listen and hear the minority voices, as you've just commented, that for me is terribly important. And while when the United States presidential election result came last year, was absolutely so shocked into silence almost, and didn't know how to approach others in regards to this. Lauren has been really important in sharing in the conversations of how we talk together. And I think that for me is something I'd love you to talk a bit more about, your concept of conversation.
One of the things that I try to do in my writing, since that's where most people are going to meet me, is to paint word pictures of what I'm talking about. And so folks have talked about the poetic style of my writing. They can hear my voice, et cetera, et cetera. But I am convinced, and this is just one the entry point to answering your question more fully. I am convinced that we remember images longer than we remember text. And if I can paint a word picture that you can engage and then continue to work through it, then I have started a conversation with you. And it doesn't matter if I'm there or not, because you are working through the image and the implication of the image, and whether that makes sense for you or not, or if that's something that you want to share with others, it just keeps going. Likewise, when I'm in the classroom, and one of the things I was excited about retiring as dean is that I had decided to go back to the classroom full-time teaching before I really retired. And it was this moment of realization, the first class back this past semester, of how much I tell stories in class so that students, and no matter what the difficult concept is, I try to come up with a story. And if it's personal, even better, because then they feel like they're getting the real inside track on my life. But it creates then an opportunity for them to go, oh yeah, there's that. Something like that happened. And this is where the concept of particularity comes in, something that's very much a part of a lot of womanist work. If I tell you my story as clearly and precisely and deeply as I know it in this moment, hopefully you'll hear something that rings true for your story. And then we have a bridge to talk to each other about. And so that's why I think communication is so important for me, because it's the opportunity for us to work together, even across whatever differences and ideologies and theologies that may divide us. But we find something common we can begin a relationship with and understand each other better. And that's why, for me, communication is so important in the work that I do, and I hope that we all do, is that we're reaching out, trying to find resonances with one another. Yeah, let me stop there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emilie. Montague has a question or a comment.
Well, when someone reads a bio and they have to do that work of trying to figure out how to fit everything in, but not have to take all the time, you notice things, you know. And, reading the different institutions you were a part of, how do I put this? They are very different institutions. Uh, Yale, Vanderbilt, Boston University, and those aren't all. But as I think about that, and I think about the nature of institutions, institutions can't love a person. Institutions survive. It's their job. But in the midst of that, you've done work to make turns in institutions, very substantive turns. I can't help but think that has to be tied to hope and creativity, cultivation, and communities of joy along the way. But I'm sure you've heard, as people talk to each other across institutions, there can be a lack of hope, or even like a pulling away of hope when you face certain things. So I was wondering, as you've moved across these different institutions with this kind of commitment to the kind of changes and visionary work you've done, where do you turn for hope? How have you felt it? How have you known that it's doing its good work in your life?
I'll tell you a story. Two stories, actually. When I was writing Breaking the Fine Rain of Death, African American Healthcare African American Health and a Womanist Ethic of Care, I was on the last chapter of that book, and I got stuck. And James Cone, I was teaching at St. Paul School of Theology, and James Cone came out to do a couple of lectures. And a lot of people don't know that Jim was a health nut. He ran every day, was in the gym at least 4 days a week, refused to eat out at restaurants because he didn't know what they were putting in his food. I mean, he really was someone who took care of his health as much as he could. And so he was interested about the book. He wanted to know how it was going. And that was the first question when I picked him up at the airport. How's the book going? And I said, Jim, I don't understand this. I'm stuck, because after going through this whole book and the grim news around Black health in America, and there's just no good news. There was none, no good news. We were either too high or too low on all the markers in bad ways. I said, I don't get it. I still have hope. I don't know where this is coming from, but I know all this stuff and I still have hope. And Jim reared up in the seat and looked at me and said, Emilie, you have to have hope. You must have hope because the only alternative is despair, and then they've won. And I'm driving like, damn, Jim, you're right. And I realized in that moment, there wasn't a day in my life where the churches I grew up in and the people, the Christian folk I grew up around, preached despair. It was always hope. It was always possibility. I finished the book in 2 weeks after that. And I realized even each day of the year since when was the inauguration? I something bad comes out and it eats away a little bit, but then I keep roaring back the next day with this. I am not going to let this take my joy or my hope. I'm going to keep fighting 1 foot at a time, moving on. This past semester, one of my classes is entitled The Political Economy of Misery. And it's as heavy as it sounds, but it was a fantastic class, really engaged students. They bonded in ways that I've not seen a class bond. And I think it helped that I tried something I had not tried before to help that along with the kind of small group work they had to do throughout the semester to build towards a common project. And we were near the end of the semester. And one of the young men in the class who was from Colombia, the country, and getting more and more nervous around immigration stuff. And there were a couple other of the students in the same place. And he was sitting off to my right in the classroom. And he was usually somebody of great joy. This was a 6'2" Colombian gay male out to everybody in the school. He vogued his way across the stage at commencement. I have never seen anyone do that. And that, he brought the house down. And I was like, no, I've never seen that at Union. I've not seen that. I mean, I went through all the places where you would think. And he was courageous in many ways. And I forget what we were talking about, but he looked at me and he said, Professor, where do you find hope? Because you still have it, but how? Where does it come from? And without thinking, I looked at him, it's because of you. And his eyes got big. And then I said, and everyone else around this table, we are still here. And we still believe in varying ways, because it was a 16-person class. So every opinion in +2 was in the classroom every week. but all of us care. How can we not hope? How can I not hope if you keep showing up? So it's that sense for me of possibilities and really, really trying to lean as hard as possible. And it's getting tested these days. I want to be clear about that. That I am not allowed to give up. Too many folk lived their lives so I could be where I am today and where we all are today. And they did it under hard circumstances sometimes. So, as my 80-year-old aunt said after the 2016 election, when my spouse and I were sitting around the dinner table with her, moaning and groaning, and she finally looked at both of us and said, "Look here," which is never a good idea. When a Black woman starts a sentence with "look here," you need to start backing up. She said, "Look here. We have been here before and we're here again. So you two need to get busy." And we dummied up really quickly and went right back to work, trying to figure out how to keep hope alive and do something more with our lives and the lives of others. So it's for me, it's almost a sense of responsibility. I guess that's a good way to put it. I was raised not to give up. So I've been lucky, and I've been in places where there have been this small group of people, may not be the whole faculty, but it's enough people that we get together and we start dreaming bigger.
Thank you so much. Incredible stories you're sharing with us. I'm just sitting here delighting in all of them. I think we have time for one last question, and I see that Denise has her hand up. And so we'll let Denise's question finish us out here.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Dr. Townes, for your sharing today. I have the privilege of serving as Assistant Dean for Academics at the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology at the Other Union in Virginia. And my question comes from that place. This morning, we learned that the IRS ruled that preachers can, from their pulpit, endorse candidates.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a conversation with one of our students who's a chief aide to one of our U.S. representatives, and we were just reflecting on what a precarious moment for Black preachers.
Mm-hmm.
Every year we graduate 100 or better Black preachers into the pulpits in this area and across the country. And I am struck that this is a moment when they need particular guidance, because what is lawful is not necessarily right or good. I wonder what word you might have as we think about that task.
Yeah. Before my sister, Trisha Townes, look for her work, Trisha Townes, became an artist. She was a lawyer. And she was a successful lawyer, but she hated it. And one day we were talking while she was still a lawyer, and she was troubled by a case she had. And I said, "Well, do you feel like you missed something in the law? I mean, did you follow everything?" And she looked at me, my younger sister, I should add. And younger sisters have a particular look they can give their older sisters that nobody else in the world can duplicate. She gave me that look, And she said, Emilie, just because it's legal doesn't make it right. At that moment, I knew that she was not going to be long for law, and that Covenant Presbyterian Church Sunday school had kicked in, and she was going to do something else. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I knew it wasn't going to be law. And sure enough, shortly after that, she announces that she's wants to be an artist and is getting her portfolio in order. And none of us in our family knew she had even been taking art classes. She's that kind of person. So remembering just because something is legal doesn't make it right is something that I think all of us who do that thing called theology in some form need to remember that there comes a time and a space where our own human conventions are not enough. And we need to step beyond what the rules say and what's appropriate and say, what would God have me do? Not what would Jesus do, but what would God have me do? We had to boot it up. If it's not God, then the Holy Spirit, one of those two. And think very carefully about what comes out of our mouths. I was years and years and years ago now when Harold Washington was running for mayor of Chicago. It was a big deal. There was just a lot going on in the city. He was running against Jane Byrne. My friends who were white feminists were for Burns. My friends who were Black liberationists were for Washington. I was for Washington, which made me sort of an anathema to my friend. I mean, it was all over the place. And I wasn't in the pulpit, but I was pastoring a little Black gay church. And somebody was talking to somebody in the church after church one day, and they said, well, Pastor, who are you going to vote for? And I said, well, I think I'm going to vote for Washington. All of a sudden, the entire church was voting for Washington. And it was at that moment I knew I needed to be careful about what came out of my mouth in terms of politics, because I was speaking as not their pastor, but as a citizen. But that's not what they heard. They heard their pastor endorsing a candidate. And I think we need to think carefully about that. Now, I have certainly been around enough churches where I have heard pastors endorse candidates, and I've agreed and I've disagreed with who they're endorsing. But that doesn't make it right. What we can do and should do is hold community forums in our institutions so that folks can hear the issues, hear the candidates, and make up their own minds. That's what we should be doing, as opposed to bloviating.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much to Reverend Dr. Emilie Maureen Townes. I did that in honor of your mother, Dr. Townes.
Thank you.
And I just want to say again, what a delight it's been to have you here with us. Thank you so much for accepting your award. Congratulations on the award. Congratulations on your lifetime membership to the Religious Education Association as well. And I'll note for our participants here, there is a link to the Padlet in the chat. That's our online announcements board. You can also, there will be a link to the feedback form for this session as well. And so again, I'll just add a clap here and my thanks again for you being with us. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your time away from Boston and having a good summer.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all again. I am deeply honored and moved.
You're so very welcome. Thank you.